Coming in hot, 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 Lisa shares her financial tips and strategies to build wealth, have fun with finances, and be debt-free without having a restrictive budget. From bankrupt to millionaire, Lisa knows what it's like to feel as if you're living paycheck to paycheck. Her unconventional money multiplier system is the very wealth protocol that enabled her to retire 2.5 years early, pay down $100,000 of debt in 6 months, and move to her dream home at the beach. I love debt. Who says that? I do. As a wealth activator, I had to fall in love with debt because I had so much of it and I hated debt. I used to have the I hate debt worksheet, and I really did not like debt. And when I started doing my own work to discover how debt has helped me, I realized that debt is good. When I, was 22 years old, I had $32,000 worth of debt. And back in the early 90s, that was a lot of money. And it was ironic because I was a bankruptcy paralegal and I helped people. I created budgets for people who had just filed for bankruptcy so that they wouldn't be in that position again. And I remember creating these budgets, looking at their paperwork going, oh my goodness, how could they rack up so much debt? It's really easy, isn't it? And it's so tempting. And so many people, especially young people in their 20s, are racking up debt just to meet their necessary expenses, like rent. Drives me absolutely crazy. So being in this cycle of debt, I've had to file bankruptcy when I was 22 years old. And it was embarrassing because, like, why? You're a bankruptcy paralegal, you know all about this, why are you doing it? And I knew that it was going to ruin my credit for 7 years, but I needed relief from it. And nothing was working. Nothing was working. I was working 2 jobs. I was working full time. I was a single mom. I had a side gig, and all of my money was going towards my expenses, and there was nothing left over. So if I needed clothes for me or my child, then I would use credit, and I'd be like, oh, I'll pay it off when I get the bill. The bill would come and I'd look at it and be like, I spent that much money. And that's the cycle of debt, right? So when you look at your debt, when you track your debt, when you complete, in my wealth activation program, we have a workbook, and in the workbook is a I love debt worksheet. And my clients have the option to pay off their debt with either the snowball or the avalanche. The snowball is my favorite. So what I did is, I've been in finances and insurance since 1987. And I thought, well, if I become a financial coach, a certified financial coach, then I'll be able to pay off my debt and I can do it on my own and this and that. I mean, I got to the point where I had contacted counseling agencies to help me get out of debt, but they wanted like so much money per month. I was like, no. And the reason why I didn't like it was because they were going to take my money away from me, and no one's going to take my money away from me, right? I wanted to be in charge. I wanted to be responsible. I didn't want to be this silly little kid, who didn't know how to manage money. So I became a certified financial coach, and I became a merit badge counselor, teaching the merit badge personal finance, which later turned to personal management. And I learned a lot, right? But once I filed for bankruptcy, I had my career job at the Social Security Administration, and I started seeing and working with people, getting them their benefits, and seeing like a lot of people, regardless of their wealth status, whether they were poor, middle class, rich, they all had the same concern. Will there be enough? And that always amazed me because they all had debt. I'm talking doctors, lawyers, they had debt. They had student loan debt. They had their mortgage. So just because you think somebody makes a lot of money, you're probably right, they do, but that doesn't mean they have a lot of money. Because if you haven't visited the idatemoney.com and gone through the dating experience, the money dating game, girl, get yourself out there. Pick your partner. The money maker, Maverick, the money maker, is all about making money, but he doesn't necessarily know how to multiply his money the way Ian, the investor, knows how to. And when you think about it, yeah, we can all make money. but what we do with that money is what's important. And one of the reasons why we use debt is because we want to use other people's money and keep our own so we can do whatever we want with it, right? So creating this I love debt worksheet lets you see the power of pen and paper is so amazing. I can't remember the stats on it, but I believe it's like when you write something down with a pen on a piece of paper, it activates, I don't know, it makes you remember it so much more, right? It accelerates that memory, and you're more likely to do something when you physically write it down with pen and paper. So by writing down and creating this I love debt worksheet, you're looking at the big picture. The first time I did this, I was in tears. I was sobbing because I was debt-free at 22 after I filed for bankruptcy. Okay. The only thing I had was my car loan, and I was able to reaffirm on my car because I needed that to get to work. And then I paid it off, and I actually paid it off 3 years after I filed for bankruptcy. And I remember the local bank was having a refinancing for used cars, and I couldn't get a refinance because of my bankruptcy. And I thought, screw you. I was so upset. So I just continued to pay, and I finally paid it off. I used my tax returns to pay off the car. So it took me 3 years, and I was debt free. Did a fantastic job of saving 30% of my money plus 10% for 22 years until I was 40. So from 22 until 40. And then something snapped inside of me, some old memory patterns from my younger me, where I started racking up debt again. I got a 0% credit card in the mail, an offer, and I was like, oh, this is so cool. And this is what I'm going to do. And I started using it for education, vehicles, remodels in my home, travel. And every time my kids wanted something, it would just go on the card and I'll pay it later. It's 0%. And I didn't pay attention to it. So I hated it, because whatever you don't pay attention to, you don't really like, right? And you ignore things you don't like. You don't do things you don't like. So as I was sitting here ignoring all of this credit card debt that I was incurring, these 0% offers, which are fantastic, I can borrow money for free. Well, guess what? They run out. I no longer loved debt. And this cycle kept happening over and over again. At one time, I had 12 cards maxed out at 0%. And as they started to mature, they would hit that 12 months. I didn't have the money to pay them. And it was like, what am I going to do? I have to pay all this interest. I don't want to pay interest. So I would get a consolidated loan at a lower interest rate. At one point, I had used my car as a secure loan, and it was like $36,000 loan to pay off these credit cards. And what it did, I leveraged that debt, because once I consolidated and got a personal loan, I was getting the 0%. And then I was able to juggle the money around to get that lower interest rate and make a plan to pay it off. But this cycle lasted to the point where I got to like, I'm a financial coach. I need help. Why do I continue? I would pay 4 or 5 credit cards off, and then it'd be like, great, I only have, 7 more to go. And I was working full time. I was working overtime. I was working a side gig. And yet I was still feeling like I had too much expenses. I had too much credit card debt. And I did, because I kept using them and I kept racking them up, and it had nothing. I had the money to pay for the things. I just wasn't strategically using it to multiply it. Instead, I was using this debt because it was a crutch. I was literally self-sabotaging. And so many people, so many women that I hop on calls with to do wealth activation calls, they're in the same boat. And I thought, there's a lot of young people that I have talked to that do the same thing as well. So what is it about this attraction, this love-hate relationship we have with debt? And I know some people are great. My husband's one. He uses a credit card and pays it off the next month. It's no big deal, right? It took me a long time to be able to do that. And it's so easy to fall back in that cycle. And a lot of my clients will come to me saying, well, I have debt. I have $50,000 worth of debt. When I finally did my I Love Debt worksheet, and I looked at my debt and I looked at the scenario and I looked how debt helped me, what it did to help me get ahead, I had $100,000 worth of debt, $100,000 worth of debt. But when I looked at my financial portfolio, my net value, I was still a multimillionaire. I had $2 million at that time. So even by using my money to pay down, to pay off that $100,000, I was still a millionaire. And that was like, wow. And now I'm seeing that, like, I've invested in a coaching program that is the most investment I've ever done. And I think about using my savings to pay it. And I get this block, wait a minute. If I take this money out, will I still be a millionaire? And I go through this thing of, am I still a millionaire? I got to check. But that's what we do when we date money. We look at these numbers. We're always looking at our assets. We're always looking at our income that's flowing in and giving thanks and celebrating, right? But we're always going to have these interrupting thoughts, things that we're trying to avoid, things that we're scared of, that keep us from living on debt, that keep us from paying off that debt. Because when you truly love debt, you're going to let it go. You're going to set it free. Now, you know where I'm going with that, don't you? Because you don't want to be in a cycle of debt where you're constantly buried by these things in the past that you bought that you may or may not have still, right? We want our money to work for us. And there's a perfect way to leverage debt so that you can multiply your money. But if you're not doing it simultaneously, if you're just continuously using debt and then taking your income and blowing it, you're always creating a deficit. You're always creating this cycle of debt. So if you want to crush on debt, you can implement the system that I offer in my program to help you break this cycle. So when you implement the money multiplier system, then you're going to be able to break the cycle. So let's hop on a call, and it's a free call, wealth activation, where we'll take a look at your portfolio, your financial portfolio, and with just a few little tweaks, some realigning, we'll make your money work for you. Because it doesn't matter how much you have, it's what you do with it. Hey, thanks for tuning in. Be sure to rate the show, give us some love. We would love your review. And remember, it doesn't matter how much money you make, it's what you do with it. And some words of advice: pay yourself first. Are you ready to partner with money? Go check out the money dating game at idatemoney.com and choose your partner. We hope you always get the date you want.